Welcome to Tuesdays with MARV, the Medford Arts Resource Vehicle. I'm Sarah Beardsley, co-president of Mackey. MARV is an arts center on wheels, bringing supplies and inspiration to local neighborhoods. In this time of physical distancing, MARV is staying home too, but we want to continue to bring arts programming to Medford and beyond with a series of creative events featuring local artists and their work. We want to thank our funders, including the Medford Arts Council, Arts Alive Medford, the Massachusetts Cultural Council, and members of the Medford Arts Center, Inc. If you are an artist who would like to share your work as part of this series, please email us so we can send you our application form. Thank you for coming and enjoy your time with MARV.
For well over 20 years now, I've been traveling across the United States, doing a lot of road trips, a lot of them with my wife, some of them not with her. We've covered every state. And, you know, we've done a lot of hikes, we've done a lot of driving the open roads and just seeing what this country has to offer. A lot of these pictures are more, you know, surface pictures. They're about the landscape. This is the Grand Canyon. They're about the road, the open road. Various sights you will see on the side of the road. Beautiful buildings. North Dakota. Beautiful, lots of great weather, especially when you get out west, when the skies open up. This is monsoon season in Arizona. This is Montana, another storm on the horizon there. Monument Valley. So a lot of travel. About 5 or 6 years ago, my interest became much more deeper, and I started to get very involved in the history of America. So a lot of my travel then centered on historical sites. So I'm going to pick one particular one, and this is the Mississippi Delta, and kind of go over how history is in the places of America. And then I think it'll start to make sense why I went down to the border, because again, I feel that throughout American history and currently, there's a lot of fault lines in America, these divisive lines where they keep reoccurring. And we are sort of dealing with this as a culture. A lot of these go back to the Constitution, of course, but we'll talk about that. This is Greenwood, Mississippi. Greenwood, Mississippi, unfortunately, is known for a place that has had the most lynchings in America. When I was photographing this, I had no idea of that. This was something I just found out. I was listening to an interview on NPR with Nicole Hannah-Jones, who is well known for the 1619 Project, and her family is from Greenwood. This particular picture I photographed through a window, so you're getting some cool reflections in there. If you travel about 15 miles from Greenwood, you come to Money, Mississippi, and you find this historical site. It doesn't look like an historical site, but it actually is an historical site, and most of you will be familiar with the site. It's the Bryant Grocery Store, and you can read it right there. This is where 14-year-old Emmett Till came to buy candy, and I think most of you probably know the rest of the story. Right next door to it is this gas station that was restored. It was restored with grant money. All of this property is owned by one family, and the sign is sort of in between the two. Now, when I went to Mississippi, I specifically went to Mississippi on this particular trip to visit all of the sites dealing with Emmett Till. I felt this need to sort of confront this aspect of our history. I had grown up pretty much on a history that was very, Pollyannish. It just, everything good about America. And of course, as you learn more and more, you realize that's not the case. So up the road a bit is a Emmett Till Interpretive Center. This is in Sumner, Mississippi. So I decided to visit there, and when I did, I noticed there was a sign laying on the side there, and you'll see it there, and it's shot up with gunfire. And that was another memorial plaque for Emmett Till near the Tallahatchie River, where his body was found. His body was thrown in the river, and then it was found there. And as you can see, it's shot up. Now, it turns out this particular sign, this was the second sign. There was a third sign that just went up, and then that one was shot. So, interestingly enough, I was discussing this with him, and it's out in the middle of nowhere. Nobody really knows technically who's shooting this. But 3 weeks later, as I was driving back, this was a month-long road trip that I took last summer. NPR had a show on, and ProPublica had discovered who shot it up. It was discovered because the people that shot it had posted something on Instagram, sort of bragging about shooting it. And they were students from Ole Miss. And Ole Miss is kind of known as, its spiritual founder is Robert E. Lee. Those students were suspended. Now, across the street, we're still in Sumner, is the courthouse where the murderers of Emmett Till were tried. So on the right side of the courthouse is this sign. And again, you all know the story. They were let off, and they later confessed to the killing. If you go inside the courthouse, it's still an active courthouse. You can see where the jury sat. This is what kind of blew my mind. I did not expect to find this there. So to the left of the courthouse is this Confederate statue. Again, this continues to come up. There's nothing very special about this statue. This is a lost cause statue. This is sort of a rewrite of history. They're trying to sort of gloss over slavery. The inscription was written by the poet laureate of the Confederacy. And again, this is how conflicted America could get. That in this courthouse, on one side you could have a memorial to Emmett Till, and on the other you can have a Confederate statue. And not to mention, there's the Mississippi flag flying right below the American flag, which is in the news today because I believe in the last few days, the Mississippi legislature just determined to take the Confederate flag off of there. So I think it just needs to be approved by the governor, and he said he would do that. So we're going back here. So this is Bryant Grocery Store. So I went to this site several times, different lighting. I find anything that is, it's sort of, you have to kind of come and go. My first time there, I have to say I was eerily scared. It isn't sort of in the middle of nowhere. If you kind of dig in through the bush onto the left, you kind of can see what's left of the building. This is a photograph I took. I shoot a lot of black and white film. This shows you the Bryant Grocery Store on the right, and you see the gas station on the left. This is all owned by the same family. Now, they were offered to restore the foundation with a grant, and they turned it down at the Bryant Grocery Store. People have offered to purchase the Bryant Grocery Store, and they've set the price way too high. They've actually restored the gas station right next door to it that has no value. That gas station does not pump gas. So you kind of get a sense of how sinister this is. this is the other side of it. It's just been allowed to be covered up. Turns out that the family that owns this, they are the children of one of the jurors that determined that the murderers of Emmett Till were innocent. Again, that's the front. Black Lives Matter. So I've gone to 4 protests in Boston so far this year, or in the last month. I feel this is a very historical time. I mean, obviously we have a pandemic going on. This is the biggest protest since 1968, really, Martin Luther King's, in terms of widespread protests in every major city. This is a young girl who, you know, one thing I feel really happy about is the amount of youth that are participating and how competent they are. When you go to one of these protests, there's people making signs for you, or you can make your own sign. Of course, there are people there who are not necessarily on the same side as this. And so a lot of times you see confrontations. Sam is actually a photographer. You can obviously see that. You can see his camera there. He actually did a very good job at using reason to try and communicate to this man. One thing I realized here, with a lot of these photographs of protests, there's so much text going on with the signs, but also on bodies. Now you'll see on his, he actually has "We the People" on his forearm. But then another really interesting thing is it says 3% on his hand. If you notice, between his thumb and his finger. I had no idea what that meant, but it has a meaning. Basically 3%, it's a very right-wing sort of gun group. My understanding is that they believe that only 3% of the population partook in the Revolutionary War. So all you need is 3% of your population now to be manned up, and you could topple the government if necessary. They were actually formed during the Obama administration. This is Boston Common, streets of Boston. Military police on the streets. This man here, he made a lot of signs for people when they came. He was sort of an artist, definitely was an artist. He made this sign for himself. What I think is interesting, if you look, there says 3/5 man with question marks on it. That's reference to the Constitution. Marching in the streets of Boston. This is the State House in Boston. Again, listed names. As they march through the city, you know, they're chanting. And so they usually take turns, the leaders take turns with the megaphone and keep people chanting. And it's a pretty exciting time to be when you're out there. This is Lynn. He's a pastor from Lynn. He's actually a youth pastor. He was a very powerful speaker. He's in front of the Boston State House. And there we are, history repeating itself. So now we're at the border. So the border, to me, you know, again, I've traveled quite a bit, fairly extensively in America. But I really never paid attention to the border, let alone the border wall. I mean, and when the border wall became such a focus in politics, I was really drawn to it. And I had to convince my wife to really go down there and take a look, you know, because this is probably not everyone's idea of a vacation. I can't say that I would call it a vacation. To me, it's, I don't know, it's research, it's travel, but it's really, I'm really drawn to it. This is Playas de Tijuana. This is the beach of Tijuana region. We're going to start off there. I am standing on the beach looking up at the wall as it moves its way through Tijuana. This is me on top of the wall. Now you can see the Pacific Ocean, and that's America on the other side. Now, lots of, you know, basically you'll see lots of arts, but also really a lot of murals, and they're really about migrants, you know, forgotten people. We'll talk more about that. A lot of these people were deported, and this is to show you that they're, you know, these are real people. You know, there's like one of the people there is a mom who still has a couple of her children in America. And this is what it looks like as it recedes into the Pacific Ocean. Now, I tried to get into the American side of this. It's called Friendship Park, strangely enough. It is, you know, it's been closed for a long time now. So unfortunately, I couldn't show you what it looks like from the American side. I attempted on a couple occasions. I believe I could do it, but I think I would have to park so far down the coast. But let's put it this way, this side is much more interesting. This is a mural right over. It's like if I scan my camera to the right, you would see the ocean and you would see the wall there. Lots of beautiful murals. There's a door in the bottom right corner and a window. That's a migrant shelter. So there's lots of shelters. There's a lot of nonprofits that are working with people in this area. It's easy to make a lot of friends and connections in this area, and I've done so, and we'll talk more about that soon. As you go up the coast, so that would be going south, actually, down the coast, lots of restaurants. This is downtown Tijuana. And by the way, everything you see here in black and white, I shot with black and white film. So I shoot black and white film, and then I shoot color digitally. There's a lot of connection in Mexico with the, you know, pre-Columbian past, unlike America. This is a mural that's in the red light district of Tijuana. Another mural. This mural is actually done by the same mural artist that did the snail one that you saw earlier. I'm going to show you a group of pictures all taken in the same little location, just to show you, like, as a photographer, when I find something interesting, I go back often, several times a day, multiple days. I love murals, and I love to see how life unfolds in front of them. You can imagine, how long has this man been, you know, shining shoes here? Ultimately, I came to love this photograph the most. I feel that it just has so much texture all the way through, and it's just, I find it a very beautiful picture. Back to Playas de Tijuana. So where I'm standing now, there's a little cafe. So there's a little cafe here, and there's a boardwalk, and then right behind me is that migrant shelter, just to kind of orient you. And again, I just love this little viewpoint with, the umbrellas. I find this sort of poignant. It's like, you know, a lot of the Mexican border towns are just still waiting for tourists that unfortunately don't come from America. But Playas de Tijuana, one thing I want to make sure you understand, it's really, really a vibrant community. So the color pictures help to show that. When I first arrived there in the morning, there was a lot of exercise classes going on. I mean, this is not what you see on the American side of the border, I can tell you that. I mean, you know, just look at the artwork here, you know, the beautiful, all the beautiful, you know, the murals on the wall. People are doing selfies and taking pictures. They're having a good time. Lots of street vendors. This is downtown area again. Frida Kahlo is everywhere. She's like a goddess. This is directly downtown Tijuana. So if you were to probably go to Tijuana, they would, you know, you take a taxi and they drop you off right here. The Virgin de Guadalupe, and you have Frida Kahlo. This is Caesar's, Caesar's Inn, Caesar's Hotel, and they have a beautiful restaurant. When you go into this restaurant and hotel, you are totally transported into the highest end restaurant in Manhattan, is what it feels like. This is, of course, where the Caesar's salad comes from. So I had a Caesar salad there, and it was amazing. They bring over a cart. Everyone's dressed up in beautiful suits. So we're going to move now. We're going to move along the border, and we're going to go east. And we are now entering Arizona. This is Organ Pipe National Park. Those are not organ pipes, but I'll get to those. When we arrived on a very unusual day, of a rainy day. You don't really see that too much in the desert. So it's very, very beautiful. Unfortunately, this park is where the new wall is being built currently. So there is a sister park south in Mexico, and then there's Organ Pipe. And they are there. We've formed Organ Pipe because it's the only place in America that organ pipe cactus exists. And you can see one in the back there. There's an organ pipe. Now you can see why it's called organ pipe, a cactus. They're beautiful. There's not a lot of them, but they exist in this. And then as you go south, there's a lot more organ pipe. And unfortunately, the wall is being built there. That's a close-up of those. Okay, so now we're going to go into Arizona, the Nogales region. Actually, this is a small town called Rio Rico. This is Armando Moreno. He's a painter. I met him in Tubac, Arizona, which is a beautiful small town. So if you are ever going to go south in southern Arizona and want a place to stay, I highly recommend Tubac. Beautiful restaurants, beautiful places to stay. And the Border Community Alliance is there, and they can take you on tours. Now, Armando is a bartender, but he's also you know, a great artist. And I asked to photograph him in his studio. That's one of his paintings there. He said it's not finished. He's going to add people to the crowd. But I love it. I love the painting as it is. This is where he lives in Rio Rico. That's what it looks like. This is monsoon season last year. or was it 2 years ago? I can't remember. Anyway, this is outside his studio. And here he is now. So if you look to the right, you will see a poster. And if you look a few names down, you see Armando Moreno, his name right there. Armando, as a teenager, he was a bullfighter. That's a picture of him down below as a young man, right below the bull, the head. There's also a picture of him to the right of that. It's very faded, but that's a picture of him sort of getting toppled by a bull. He has a glass eye in his right eye, you can kind of tell. And this is his studio. And he paints, most of his customers are in Mexico for his paintings. He no longer fights bulls. Okay, so now we're gonna talk primarily about Nogales. So Nogales is a very interesting town. There's Nogales, Arizona, and Nogales, Sonora, Mexico. This is Nogales, Arizona. So in the last year or two, the concertina wire, the barbed wire, is something that's new. That's new. The other thing I want you to notice about this photograph is how high up we are compared to Mexico. So you can kind of look at the rooftop there. That's going to become important to know shortly. But this particular aspect of where we are, the land is, on the American side, is higher up, and the street on the Mexican side is low. Jose Antonio Elena Rodriguez, maybe you know him, but he was a 16-year-old boy who was on the Mexican side. So he would have been on the streets down below, pretty much where this picture is. He was down there and he was shot 10 times in the back. This occurred, let me see if I've had my notes yet, 2012. So here's another memorial for him right at that location. He lived there along with his family just a couple blocks from the border. So both of these are right there where he was shot. Here's another memorial of his that I found miles away. So this was actually at a migrant shelter. That's another picture of it. So that gives you the idea of this. So a Border Patrol agent is standing. So consider this. I'm in Mexico right now and we're photographing that. A Border Patrol agent is on the other side of the border shooting down at him. And the claim is that he was throwing stones and that they feared for their life. I mean, there's other things. There was another person climbing over the border wall coming back to America. And the Border Patrol agent actually reloaded in the middle of that shooting. He shot 16 shots. 10 of them landed in his back. So lots of crosses on the Mexican side, and these crosses represent the migrants that travel. Before I leave Jose Rodriguez, this case, did go criminally charged and civilly charged, and the Border Patrol agent was found innocent. It almost went to the Supreme Court. My understanding on that was there was another similar case that happened in El Paso that went before it, and it was determined that you can't really. I guess it's too much in deals with foreign affairs, so you couldn't deal with that. Of course, the dissent on that case was Ginsburg, who wrote the dissent on that. But basically, they've exhausted all of their legal way of dealing with this, and there's nothing the family can do about it. Sounds very familiar, of course, with what is happening on the streets today with the Black Lives Matter movement. This photograph I took in El Paso, I'm just going to show this really quickly because I photographed this 1 month prior to the El Paso massacre. It has really no relation to that massacre, of course, at all, other than the fact that guns in America are another one of those fault lines where it just, you just can't get away from it. You know, one thing that is not known about is that the amount of smuggling of guns that go into Mexico. You know, of course, everyone knows that, you know, drugs are smuggled into America, but guns being smuggled into Mexico is extremely, extremely high. It is estimated that 70% of the seized guns in Mexico trace their origin to the United States. You can buy a gun for $300–400 in the United States, and you can sell it for 10 times that in Mexico. Most of the gun smuggling goes across the Mexican border through cars. And it's, keep in mind, you can disassemble a gun, so it's probably not that hard to smuggle them. And also, I don't think, you know, it's not as, I can tell you this, when I go across the border, and I've never driven across the border, I walk, but it takes me at the most 15 minutes to get across, and it takes me on average 2 hours to get back into America. This is taken a quarter of a mile in Arizona. This is Nogales, Arizona. This is a quarter of a mile, let me complete that sentence, a quarter of a mile from the Mexican border port of entry. So when Mexicans come across the border, they will see this storefront. This is Nogales Tactical. They don't even sell guns. They sell, you know, obviously they sell, you know, clothing, that's gear, probably Border Patrol goes there, or anybody who think, or, you know, whatever. This is what people walk by all the time. You can see there, anyway, it's almost absurd. This is downtown Nogales, Arizona. So on the Nogales side, the population is about 20,000. There's really not a lot of people there. Nogales, Mexico has over 400,000 people. I just want to show you again the extensiveness that this barbed wire has been going, that, you know, just goes on forever. This is a small little, just a beautiful little area in Arizona. Lots of programs. This was a beautiful nonprofit program that worked with kids on both sides of the border, both sides of Nogales. It's an offshoot from the Border Community Alliance that I've been talking about. So there was an intern that worked there that created this program. This is, again, we're staying in Arizona, and that's the border wall there. This was taken on my first trip, so there's no barbed wire there. And this is an older part of the wall. So, but again, it's kind of, you know, it's just so interesting to see, you know, bridal shops right there. I'm just showing you this because this, again, I'm in Arizona, and this is where, you know, the train, there's so much of our produce and so much of what we consume comes through the Mexican border. So there's a tremendous amount of foreign factories just over the Mexican border. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of them. The labor costs are fractions of what we would expect over here. This is also just interesting to note. I mean, these are the train lines, even though this is Arizona, that La Bestia, the beast, the trains that were migrants from Central America would, you know, would come up north, and they would get off, of course, in Mexico and usually make their way through the desert. Now we're going into Mexico. This is Nogales, Mexico, just the other side of the border wall. The street life in Mexico is just, it's beautiful. To me, to my eyes, I love all the graphics, you know, the intense sunlight. This man has been selling corn over 30 years right here in downtown Nogales. I know that because I posted that picture on Instagram and someone from Nogales told me. Beautiful murals all over. And the street life is just very vibrant. Lots of street vendors, street musicians. You know, patrol going through and noticed a lot of that recently. This photograph was taken in Nogales, Sonora, Mexico. More street life. We'll pause here for a couple minutes. If you've seen my video about that I put up on YouTube, you know probably more about this. I'm not going to cover the same ground on it. You know, I'm on the Mexican side. This was taken my first trip. This cannot be done now only because we have all the concertina wire on the American side. I will tell you this, I mean, you have here the dad holding him up, and then you have the grandfather to the left. I felt very awkward photographing this, what was happening here. And I wasn't quite sure I was going to do it, but the grandfather, there's a little shack right next door to our right here. And he purchased a pack of gum and gave me a couple of slices of gum, and to let me know that it was okay for me to photograph. That's a little picture of him. We're going to talk now a little bit about migrant shelters in Nogales. I visited the migrant shelters 3 times, several different ones. All of them I visited with Voices from the Border. Susan's going to share a link with you afterwards, you know, after this talk and we're all done, that, you know, allows you to take a look at what they're about. If you want to make a donation to them, they could really use it, especially at this time. This particular shelter is called La Roca. It sits on this giant rock. If you climb up those stairs, immediately to the right, you can overlook the wall. There's the wall right there. So basically they are situated right, the street and then the wall. There's a very hot dog. This is the roof of that shelter, and you can see they sleep out here sometimes, and you can see the wall just kind of climbing down across the landscape there. Primarily what I saw were women and children. The first time I went down there seemed to be a lot more Central Americans, all, you know, seeking asylum. The last time I was there, it was more people from southern Mexico. The border of Mexico and Central America, I think now is much more being patrolled. So Voices from the Border brings in lots of volunteers. This doctor is from Arizona, Dr. Peter Brown, and he, you know, goes there once a week and helps with healthcare to migrant shelters and people in very, very poor situations. So this particular photo, by the way, that's mom and her 3 daughters. You know, this young baby was very sick. This was a very hot day in the summer. It was like 100 degrees. one thing I was completely amazed by is how a child, no matter what situation they're in, can find joy. So probably the heart and soul of Voices from the Border is the man to the left. His name is Pancho. He was deported from America, fell in very hard times, but then he sort of himself up by the bootstraps. He became a member. There's a church. I'm trying to think of the name of the church there. It'll come to me. But it dealt a lot with people who were homeless and down on their luck. From there, he became trained as an EMT, and now he drives an ambulance. That's his ambulance to the right. And he services all migrant shelters and places that are extreme poverty. This is one of those places right here. These people, what I found interesting is this is not homeless shelters. These people actually work. This is right along, he called it the barrio, and this is right along the tracks. Train goes right by there. Literally, there's that dirt road, and there's that. A lot of these people work in those factories that the foreign factories that I mentioned earlier. So, it's another parallel to sort of historically what we do in America. It seems that, exploitation of labor, free labor. I mean, you can't help but think if you were born in this area, life would be extremely hard and different than what we have here. Voices from the Border brings in lots of volunteers. Like, this is a teacher who is just amazing working with the kids, and she routinely goes in there. Now the Voices from the Border is having a very difficult time, as you can imagine, because they operate in Arizona, Nogales, Arizona. Well, their base is actually Patagonia, Arizona. That's where the nonprofit sort of, administrative, they have a very small footprint. I think there's only one paid person on their staff. Everyone else is volunteer. But they operate in Nogales, Sonora. But the pandemic has caused a lot of problems, as you can imagine. You've heard of the stories of Arizona. So no volunteers are able to go in there. And it's really just Pancho, who is the gentleman I showed you earlier, who's kind of, doing telemedicine. He's not even really allowed to do that, but yet they still have all the needs. They need food, healthcare, and things like that. These are some of the children. These children, I believe, are more from southern Mexico, sort of the smaller towns, and they were migrating north. This is another shelter, one of the better shelters that I went to. And again, this is a teacher who's reading to him. These are not posed pictures. This is just, how important it is. And here's Pancho. He says he likes to try to model what good male behavior should be like for the kids, because they don't really have a lot of male role models in their life. So we're almost at the end here finally, guys. So I'm going to end with this. This was taken in New York. I did this several years ago. Bosco Sodi is a Mexican artist. He deals with ceramic, like sort of brick, like sort of earthwork art. He's very well known. You can look him up. This is Washington Park. And he did this project. I think I even photographed this before I went to the border, but I became very highly interested in the wall. And so I found out that he was going to build a wall and tear it down in Washington Square. So I arrived there as soon as he started, and I stayed there an entire day. These are bricks made in Mexico. You can kind of see his signature there. And he started to build the wall. He had a lot of assistants. A lot of people came. Kids came from different school groups. They were doing projects, writing up essays, having a lot of fun just doing, building the wall. That's Bosco right there. Wall is almost built. The beautiful thing he did was then he tore it down. And everyone could take, anybody that was there could take a brick. I have a brick. So I guess the point is, you can build it and you can take it down.